Okay, here we go. Are we ready? Look like we're on again. Folks, thank you very much for joining the Oregon Voters Digest. I'm Bruce Broussard, your host. Again, like I said, we're really getting into the whole issue of the campaigns at this point in time. It's a very important time in our history and timing and whatever, but we need to know what the issues are. And I've got with me again today. You've seen him before. His name is Art Robinson. He's running for Congress, and he's ran several times for that matter, several times. But the one thing I liked about Art, besides having been, he was also chair of the Republican Party of state of Oregon, and he got involved. That's when he got involved, and he ran for office, and he's not a quitter. He's never a quitter. That's one thing about Art. I want you to know that, Art.
Fine.
You are not a quitter, but he's really got the issues. He's sort of an expert. I identify him as an expert in the whole issue of education, and he'll share that with you when he gets into his share of the background, and talk a little bit about solutions and his projections in terms of how he feels. But we're just going to start, Art, and I want you to do the majority of the talking straight up with you. I'd like for you to share with the public, one, how and why and what was your rationale for getting in politics. You know, you're a scientist, you're a family man, but get right in there.
Well, what happens when people, I'm a scientist and an educator, but when people become alarmed, it's like if your house is on fire, you don't just let the fire department do it, you grab a bucket too.
Yes.
This first happened to me during the Cold War. We were, all of us, very alarmed about the prospect of nuclear war. So my wife and we built an 8,000 person organization that worked with the Reagan administration on civil defense of civilians against nuclear attack. We just got so worried we wanted to do something. Mm-hmm. This situation now in education is so bad that we want to do something. And in fact, it's not the only issue. Our country's in trouble. It's the greatest country that's ever been built in the world. The constitutional republic we have has allowed enormous human progress, and yet it's at risk. We see our constitutional republic under attack, and it may go down against internal forces. And you become so alarmed, you want to help. Mm-hmm. You can't fix it yourself, but you want to help. Anything you can do. That's why we got in.
And you started. I guess the first announcement, if you will, is my understanding. You went to one of the local meetings.
Yeah, I went to a Pete DeFazio town hall.
Yes.
I think I barely knew who the congressman was. My sons and I went to it. We came home. We said, that can't be. That's awful. That's our congressman. Mm-hmm. And then we learned a Republican was running against him. So we thought, gee, I hope the guy beats him. And the guy dropped out. So we said, well, this guy's got to have some opposition. He's so bad. So we ran. We didn't know what we were getting into. Now we know a lot about politics. We know more about politics than we ever wanted to know, Bruce.
Well, look, I know for a fact that your platforms were many during the time you respond, but now you sort of honed it down.
Well, you have to pick one thing to talk about.
Right.
And since I know more about education than most of the people, and more concerned about it. I started out tutoring students in high school. Mm-hmm. At college in Caltech, I also was in a position helping students. At graduate school the same way. Then I became a college professor. I taught graduate students, undergraduates, postgraduate students at UC San Francisco and at Stanford. Then we educated our own children, and we started a homeschool and public school business, and we have generated curriculums and books for 100,000 K through 12 students.
Yes.
And also I had to educate my own children after my wife died, and 3 of them skipped 2 years of college. All of them got degrees in engineering and science, and 5 of them have doctorates. So I've been in education all my life. But you know what happens in politics? Your opponent, unprincipled people, not all are unprincipled, my opponent said, well, education...
Who is this guy?
DeFazio.
All right.
DeFazio says, well, Robinson is super in education, and I haven't done a thing in it, so what I'm going to do is tear him down in education. You see, that's your strong suit. You go out there, the people see, hey, he's an educator. He can do something about the schools. DeFazio didn't want that. So he spent $1 million telling everybody I was against education.
Wow.
Same thing in research. My main life's work has been in medical research. And I've published, my colleagues and I have published superb papers on breast cancer, multiple sclerosis, muscular dystrophy, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's. We've done really good work in diagnostic medicine. And so DeFazio goes out and he tells everybody that I live in a survivalist compound, I'm a nut, and I have a lab out in the barn somewhere. He attacked me on the education, on the science, because he knew my medical research work was outstanding. It was world class. We were known all over the world for our work, and he didn't want the voters to see that. So he spent another $1 million laughing at my medical research. That's the way the politicians do it. But education, let's go back to that.
Yes, let's go back to education.
When I went to school 50 years ago, the K through 12 schools in our country are the best in the world, academically superior to anything else on earth. Now, they're at the bottom of the heap, on average. That's not telling you there aren't good schools, and we have hundreds of thousands of great teachers, but the average is poor. The worst schools in this country are in Washington, D.C., and it just happens that those are the only schools that Congress has authority over. The 10th Amendment leaves schooling to the states and the people, but not in D.C. There are 50,000 students in D.C. that this Congress educates.
And DeFazio is part of that.
And Positivo is part of it. Do you know that 40% of those kids don't graduate and the other 60% read at a 5th grade level? Those are the worst schools in the country. Now, a few years ago, the Congress, to its credit, started some charter schools, started some voucher programs, started some programs to gradually improve them. I don't like gradual improvement. I don't want to write off 50,000 students and hope for the next ones to be good. But they started it.
Right.
DeFazio voted against the whole thing. He voted that way because the unions didn't want the changes, and he wants the union support election time. But the fact is those schools are terrible. And he says, he's told people I'm against schools, so I decided my platform this time would be close the schools.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay.
And that's what if as a congressman, I would do. In June, when school's out, I close the D.C. schools, and I get my colleagues in Congress to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And the first month, and we we lay off everybody.
Okay.
And the first month, we hire all the teachers back, except for the few that are poor. We bring in great people to understand it. Most of those teachers, I'm sure, are fine teachers. We hire them all back, along with replacing any that are poor in quality. Mm-hmm. And we spend the next 2 months having the best educators in this country design a superb educational system for those students, a new one. When school opens, the DC schools are the best in the country instead of the worst. Now, you notice I left something out. We just hire the teachers back. We don't hire the others. Did you know that in D.C., $450,000 is spent for every 30-student classroom for 9 months? $450,000. But that money, most of it, doesn't go to the classroom. It doesn't go to the teachers. It doesn't go to the students. It goes to a giant mob of union, bureaucratic, administrative, non-teachers. And it not only costs us money, but they sit around making it hard for the teachers to do their job. When my uncle taught school after the war, he got out of the Navy. My mother and my uncle were both school teachers. My uncle gets out of the Navy, goes back to Iowa, and he starts teaching a full class of students in the rural schools. They gave him a few bucks extra to be superintendent of schools. They were going to have non-teachers in their schools. The administration can be done by the teachers. And if it's done by the teachers, they won't get in the way. That I don't want to stop the 450,000 because I want those schools to be the best in the world in 3 months. Not next year, not 2 years from now, not gradually changing now, because there are 50,000 students there. You don't write them off saying we're going to gradually improve them. You fix it.
Right.
So you fix that, and you use that as an example for the whole country. You pour educational talent into those schools. You get out the people who don't have educational talent. You put in a great program, and you make those things such a tremendous example for the country that you help schools all over the United States by example, even though the schools in the states are a responsibility of the state governments. So I want to close those schools. When we reopen them 3 months later, they're going to be fantastic. Pete DeFazio doesn't even want gradual improvements because the unions don't, so he votes against it. He's never taught a student. Well, I don't take that away from him. Maybe he's great on defense, or maybe he's great on something else. He's not really very great on anything.
I'm concerned right now.
But right now we're talking about education. This guy's he spent over $1 million telling the people of Oregon that I'm against education. My whole life has been education. I'm successful at it. Even the curriculum we distribute now has won 7 first-place awards for excellence. Pete says to everybody, Robinson's against education. One of my friends called his office the other day, and he says, Is Robinson really against education? Oh, they said, yeah, this Robinson is terrible. He hates kids, doesn't want to educate anybody. And my friend says, well, how come that's true when 5 of his kids have doctoral degrees?
Yes.
They hung up on him. So we've got to, and the same thing for the national schools. I'm not satisfied with gradual improvement. There are 50 million kids in our schools,
whiz.
and there are hundreds of thousands of great teachers. Those schools are not failing because of the kids. They're not failing because of the teachers. They're failing because of a giant sort of bureaucratic union complex that is built up that's bleeding away half the money and imposing a bad educational system on the country.
Well, what about world
That
ranking?
has to be fixed now.
What is world ranking right now? We at one point in time we were at the top,
probably
weren't we?
about 40th among the countries in the developed world.
Jesus Christ.
That has to be fixed now,
Gee.
not next week.
Gee.
I mean, not next year.
Right.
Those 50 million kids, you don't write them off and say they'll get better someday. You have to fix it now. And if you can fix the DC schools overnight, the worst ones in the country, not overnight, in 3 months, if you can fix those in 3 months, the whole country will look at that and say, we want it too.
I got you. No,
That's my policy.
Let's bring it back to Oregon.
Yeah.
You know, we got one of
Close
the
the
biggest,
schools.
We got one of the I like that. We got
That puts me in the basket, Bruce.
Oh, gee.
If
I
you
wanna
want to
talk
close
you
the
about that.
schools, you've got to be in the basket.
Oh, gee, yeah, definitely. Now, what about the issue of lead? You know, we've got this problem
Yeah.
here in our state,
Well,
Oregon.
I told you I was going to surprise you on the lead.
Talk to me about the lead there. We got to.
Firstly, water quality is a problem, not just lead. I mean, lead is bad for you, but we have a lot of other things in our water shouldn't be there either. But let me tell you something. You know, California just had a drought. At the same time, California decided to close 2 nuclear power plants. Now, did you know that those 2 nuclear power plants could provide enough energy to desalinate the water for all 38 million California families? All the water except agriculture in that state could be provided by the energy from those 2 plants.
Desalinate. What do you mean by that?
That means you take salt water, you take ocean water and make
Right.
it pure.
ocean water.
That's a lot easier than making regular water pure. And it doesn't take out lead, it takes out everything that's bad for you. Now, Oregon is only, well, there are 38 million in California. It's about a tenth the size of Oregon. A little tiny nuclear power plant, about a tenth the size of one of those plants they closed, could make pure water for everybody in the Portland metropolitan area. And there is a company in Corvallis that's struggling to produce that little tiny nuclear power plant. Pete's been against that program for most of his career. Pete DeFazio.
DeFazio.
Now he says he's for it because I came out and challenged him on nuclear power, so he went over there and
Does he
says
have a
he's helping.
background? Does he have a
But
background
let
in
me tell you
nuclear
what
power?
the government, his background in nuclear power is to be against it.
Oh.
But in those people trying to do that, it's a great program, started at Oregon State, run by a guy named Jose Reyes. They've been trying for almost a decade to get permission to build a prototype. I talked to one of their engineers recently. He says it'll be another 5 years. The federal government won't let these guys even build a prototype of a plant that would provide enough energy to make all the water in the Portland metropolitan area not only free of lead, but free of all the other pollutants such as that are a problem. The answer is energy. The reason that you have lead in the water, the reason you have pollution in these things, is you don't have the energy required to drive the technology to fix it. The technology is there, but you don't have the energy. Instead, these politicos are going the other way. They want to shut down the nuclear plants. They've done that for 30 years. No new ones have been built. They want to shut down the hydrocarbon power, coal, oil, and natural gas.
Who benefits as a result of that?
The special interests that
Like
by the politicians.
The politicians.
The special interests.
Right, special interests, right.
Solar power is fine. Let it develop. It has some uses. It isn't. It's a dilute form of power. You could have to pay Portland with solar panels to get anything to supply Oregon.
Right.
But the point is, there's nothing wrong with solar power, diesel, wind power. Wind power is pretty impractical. But what they want to do is to tell the American people that they should have a very low imprint on the planet. We shouldn't generate very much energy, just enough to get by. That's what they say. And they're lying. They're saying we can get by with solar and wind, forget the coal, oil, natural gas, and nuclear. But energy drives technology. We have the technology to make the water, all the drinking water in this country, absolutely pure with just a few nuclear plants. But the government hasn't allowed one of those plants to be built for over 2 decades.
Tell me something. Okay, there's a
That's
cost.
the solution.
That's the
If
solution.
they had one of NewScale's
about-
little tiny plants up there in Michigan,
Right.
they could purify that water from everything. You know, it costs about,
I was going to ask you
it
about that
costs
cost.
about, with a nuclear plant, costs about 2 cents per 100 gallons.
Okay. And what about our present system? What is it costing us?
It costs about 10 cents.
10 cents.
10 cents.
That's eight cents.
That's 5 times higher. That's right.
Jesus Christ.
But the fact is that by depriving us of large amounts of energy, they've not only destroyed the industries of the United States and sent them abroad,
Right.
they have deprived us internally of the technology to make our true environment better. And in the case of lead, it's not good for you. It's bad. It's in these people's water. But the fact is that lead and every other pollutant could be taken out of that water for 2 cents a 100 gallons. And in the case of California, all of the drinking water, bathing water, washing water, and drinking water, all the personal water used in California, could be made absolutely pure with the 2 nuclear power plants they closed last year.
Jesus.
So, but you see what happened. It's not that they were nuclear, it's that deprived California of the energy to do that. So the reason that this lead is in the water, I mean, you can say, well, some politician didn't notice it and somebody covered this up and so forth in Flint, Michigan. Probably there are some scoundrels.
Right.
But the overall reason is that this country is being deprived of energy, and with being deprived of energy, we're deprived of the technology required to make sure our water is pure.
Well, you also mentioned another thing that I want to ask you, because you've been so much involved in this whole issue of politics now and this, that, and the other, and really working hard and finding the solution as to what was the rationale that really got your enthusiasm to really drive home the fact that you're going to stay in a race and really get to this point and get to that goal. And what I mean by that is that I want to ask you that question, and that is, there's this divide now. The rating of Congress right now is running about 13%.
Yeah.
And you've got people who are running like Trump, like yourself, like I've been running before, aspect of it. People are just tired. They're sick and tired. Can you talk a little bit about that? What's their rationale? What's that balance? You got politics on this end, and then you got the people.
Our constitutional republic made it possible for the free people of the United States to build the greatest nation that has ever existed. In fact, a nation no one could have even predicted what could be built.
Right.
Most of us have just lived in that freedom. We haven't thought about it much. I just lived a wonderful life in this freedom. So did most of my colleagues. We're great. We live here. Now that opportunity is challenged. Internally, the people who are interested in government power have already gained ownership of almost half of the wealth of the United States. The political people who want power and money, like Hillary Clinton, like Pete DeFazio, are destroying our republic. And most people aren't thinking of it that way. They're thinking, gee, my kids are not doing well. My son can't find a job. My living standards are going down. Do you know, in Oregon, the average state employee, the average salary and wages and benefits is $89,000. For the non-state employees, it's $49,000. The people making the 49 are paying for the people making the 89, because the government needs a bureaucratic elite to administer the power that is exercising over the American people. That removes our constitutional republic. They've taught our people that if they can give 51% of the vote, they can take away the life, liberty, and property of the 100%. That's wrong. We're mad. Now, most Americans are rising up to support Trump because they're seeing their way of life go away. They don't really understand why, but they know it's going away, and this man is talking sense. In the vernacular they understand. He talks like the guys talk when they're drinking beer watching a football game, and they understand him. Men like Ted Cruz understand it on a higher level. They understand what's happening to our constitutional republic, but the people don't respond to that so much because they don't really understand. They just know that their way of life is being destroyed. And the poor people, or in D.C., those schools, those kids that are being destroyed, those families, those parents in D.C. that know that their their young people are getting to 18, 20 years old with no future because they have no education, and the world is requiring more and more education.
You mentioned something
and those
about
people
race.
don't know why it happened,
Right.
but they know it happened.
Right.
They're mad,
Right.
and they're ready to go for a man who try to fix it.
Right, but then but they brought the issue of race. We talked a little bit about that part, and you really had a good explanation in terms of what that meant and how that came into about.
Well,
you talked about jobs, remember?
Well, yeah. What happens is, if the country gets poorer, the businessmen want to stay in business, and they can't stay. When the government's taking half everything they earn in taxes and killing them with regulations, they got to find cheap labor to stay in business. They'd hire normal, more expensive American labor if they could, but they're struggling, and so they want to hire people who are sort of enslaved because they're illegal to do the jobs that Americans should do.
But we got a solution in our system.
The
It's called
solution is
E-Verify. It
Well,
says
but
E-Verify.
they don't want that. And you see, a guy sits there. He says, "I'm a businessman. I need some labor. I can't afford." The government just took half my profits, and they just put on regulations that are going to cost me some more. And the only way I can stay in business is if I get some people to work for nothing. And the only ones that will do it are the people who came over the border illegally.
Are they all Republicans that are making all the money?
No, that's mostly. Do you know that something like 6 times as much money is coming from Wall Street to Hillary as coming to Trump? and you see what's going on. You're really separating the chaff now. The Democrats love this sort of bureaucratic tyranny, but a lot of Republicans do too. So you're watching the Republican Party split. The ones who want a free nation are going for Trump, and the ones that have been living with the Democrats and benefiting from all this are going for Hillary. You're watching the Republican Party split because only part of them are principled. In the Democrat Party, their party policy is more toward what Hillary wants, and so the split isn't as evident, but it's there. These Bernie Sanders supporters, they don't really understand why they're mad, but they're mad.
Well, the 13% that they talk about is not just, quote, Democrats and Republicans.
And let me put this in one other way, which we talked about. Martin Luther King, in his dream speech, his famous speech, the first half was an ode to the constitutional republic. It was an ode to the U.S. Constitution. The second half was a plea that the constitutional rights be applied to his people. That's what he wanted. Today, and some of those rights were applied. They got voting rights, we got rid of the apartheid in the South. But in a general sense, what happened was, instead of the African Americans getting full constitutional rights, everybody lost rights. And the white population today, in terms of freedom, stands about where the African Americans stood during his time. We've watched the civil rights movement raise the opportunities. He got part way to his objective, constitutional rights for his people.
Yep.
But at the same time, these statists, these people who want power and money and tyranny in the United States instead of the Great Republic, have made so much headway that we've all gone down. So why is it that the African Americans got those rights and still they are economically in bad shape to a large extent?
Well, some of those rights, like the voting right now,
Well, those are important.
Is being challenged.
Yeah.
It's being challenged by a number of Republicans.
I'm not telling you the civil rights movement didn't do good things. It did.
Right. Oh, yes.
But this other force, basically they moved from slavery to enslavement. This other force where the bureaucrats and the politicians and these terrible people want personal power and money. They've been driving us all down. And so it's like during the Cold War, people like me, there are people all over, productive people, coming out of the woodwork saying, "I don't know why this place is burning down, but I gotta help," because we see what's happening to our country, and we must not let it happen. So we're all coming out of the woodwork everywhere, saying, "What can I do?" And our family came out and said, "We want to run for Congress. We want to replace this one miscreant that our district has, and we're going to run against him until we do." We never quit.
Okay. Well, Art, as I chat with you, I learn something all the time, and right now my whole spin now is that we've got this presidential race, and we got the issues that we have right now. The word that comes out loud and clear to me is assimilation. You think we've learned enough now to kind of get down and talk about assimilating Americans across the board?
Let me tell
Will that
you.
ever happen?
For the Americans that are here legally,
Yes.
you and me
Yes,
and all the people
yes.
like us, we're assimilating, all right.
Yes, yes.
There's no question
If we're gonna
about that.
survive,
We
yeah.
are all in the same boat.
Yes.
And
yes,
that's
yes,
why
yes, yes.
so many of us are
Yes,
voting for Trump.
Yes, yes.
We're assimilating.
Yes.
You and I are not having any
Oh, no, no,
problems.
I'm not
And
having any problems.
the truth is that when one special group looks out at the others, really, we're all in the same boat. We're all in the same trouble. And we all have the same great republic to save. We must save the republic.
Yes.
The playing field we have to save it on is corrupt. They lie, they cheat, they steal, they're Peter DeFazios. But we have to save it anyway. Every one of us has to work as hard as we can to save the republic so that all of the people in this country can enjoy the freedom, liberty, and wonderful life that we've enjoyed because the
pursuit of
republic
happiness,
was
that's
here. And we can do it. Together we can do it.
Yes.
And the signs are good, because look at what people are doing with Trump. Trump's not everything you want in a president. He's just a guy that said, just say no.
There are many
He
out there.
said, basically, you know where the slogan comes from, but he said, this thing they're doing to my country, let's just say no. And his specific policies, some of them are good, some of them are not so good, but at least he's going to try to save the country, and the other people are just trying to use us.
Well, like you said, if we can understand what inclusion is all about,
Yeah.
an assimilation aspect,
Right.
and American history from day one in school,
That's
put it
right.
back into the
That's right.
classroom.
I
That's
went
very
down
important.
and saw the greatest.
Here we go. Okay, I guess we've been.
I was about to talk about Tuskegee, but I forgot.
Right, we'll do that another time.
Okay.
Okay, fine. Thanks very much, Art.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. I know
great.
you get back on the campaign trail, will you?
Okay.
Okay, folks.
Thanks.
Well, you heard it right here on the Oregon Voters Digest. I'm Bruce Broussard, your host. I'll see you next week. Take care. Have a good one.